Okay, in this video we're going to look at introduction to graphing. So we're going to first look at the coordinate plane of the different pieces of a plane. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the origin. So the origin is right here at 0, 0. Okay, and from here we go different directions. We can go along the x-axis, positive to the right, negative to the left, or we can go y-axis, positive up, or negative down. Okay. So everything has an ordered pair. So x's go left and right, see that here, and y's go up and down. Okay. The x is actually the input, and the y is the output. Okay. So a lot of times we plug in x's, evaluate, and we get out y's. So let's take a look here at the different pieces here. So this point here, 2 comma 4. So I'm going to start at the origin. We're going to go over 2 and then up 4. Okay. So we go x displacement, y displacement. The next point here, negative 3, 0. So I'm going to start here, go negative 3 over, and there's her point. Okay. Notice the 0 means we don't go up and down. This point here, negative 5, 2, 4, 5, and up 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. So there's our point there, negative 5, 8. And notice there's 4 different regions to the graph. We have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. So those are the different things that we're looking at in a graph. Now, other piece of the graph that we have to be aware of is it a function, the domain, and range? Okay, so the function means for every input, every x, there's only one y that comes out. And a lot of it's like a question. For every one question, there's only one answer. So for instance, if I ask you, how old are you? You say I'm 14 years old, you have one question, one answer. You're not going to say I'm 14 and 18 years old. It can't happen. So that's the definition of function. Can it happen with one answer for one question, one output for one input? So the domain is all possible x values. So let's take a look here. All possible x values. Okay, so here is the domain, okay, which is x, 4, 5, negative 3, and 4. Whereas the range are the outputs, the y values. Okay, so again, we plug in domains and we get out our range here. So here's the different range values that come out of it. All right, so let's go ahead and plot these points, take a look to see where they're at. Okay, so 4 comma 3, 5 comma 2, negative 3 comma 3, and 4 comma 1, 4 comma negative 1. Now notice, what I see here is this right here. We have, if I plug in 4, we get out a 3. If I plug in 4, we get out a negative 1. And we can see right here, we can't have two answers at positive 4. So if I say, okay, if I evaluate, x equals 4, what do I get? You get two answers. So this means not a function, okay? So that right there, I'm going to say not a function, okay? Now, where people get kind of confused is this element right here. They say, okay, what about the 3? The 3 is repeated. We see a 3 repeated there and there, okay? You can have multiple outputs. For instance, if I ask one student how old they are and they say 3 years old, and I ask another student how old they are, 3 years old, you could have two separate students, both 3 years old. That's possible. So that is a function. So we can have multiple outputs, but notice they happen at different x's. That's okay. All right, so here's another example of, x's and y's. So looking at inputs or x values. So here we have a graph, which is like a million points put together. So it's, okay, what are the possible x's, the possible outputs that could happen? Well, x's go from here all the way over here, okay? And they kind of start here and stop here. So we'd say x values, the domain, are x values that are in between the values of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 6, and go up to 2, 4, 6, 7. So x could be any number in between negative 6 and 7, including those numbers. The range, for instance, is how far up and down it goes. Well, it starts at the x-axis and it goes all the way up to this line here. So notice all the y's are in that range. So the range is y values that are in between 0 and, if we count up, 4 spaces, okay? So if I highlight the part of the graph that is taken up by this curve, Notice the whole graph exists within that box. And how wide is that box is your domain. How tall is that box is your range. And this is a function because anytime I pick a point, if I plug in x equals 1, there's only one output, one answer for that. If I plug in x equals 5, there it is right there. Okay, so this is a function. All right, the other thing we have to know about graphing anything, you could always plug in inputs. Okay, so these are inputs on the x side. Plug in inputs and you get outputs. Okay, so let's go ahead and do an example here. Okay, I'm just going to pick some random numbers to try. I'm going to try -1, 0, 3, and -2. Okay, you don't even have to be in order. I'm just randomly picking different numbers to plug in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to plug your values in for x. So I'm going to say 2 parentheses plus 1. So notice I'm going to copy that all the way down. And I'm going to plug in -1. So that's -2 plus 1 is -1. I'm going to plug in 0. And we get 1. I'm going to plug in 3. I'm just plugging in my input right here. So that's 6 plus 1 is 7. And plug in -2. So that's -4 plus 1 is -3. And what these are these are ordered pairs. So that's an ordered pair. That's an ordered pair. Input, output, input, output. So we're going to plot these. -1, comma, -1. Then we have 0, comma 1. We have 3, comma 7. We have -2, comma, -3. Okay. And notice we can draw a line that connects all those points. Okay. So if I draw a line, this is a linear pattern. What this is, this equation, okay, this equation shows shows the relationship between x and y, and it follows a line. Okay. So if I plugged in, x equals 2, it would land right there on the line. Okay. So let's take a look at another example. Okay, now notice here, if I want to plug in values, I'm going to plug in 0, -3, and 1, and 2. Kind of taking random numbers. If I want to get the output, I need to solve for y. Okay, so I'm going to move the 2x over to the other side. I need to get y by itself. So 2y is equal to -2x plus 3. I'm going to divide everything by 2. So that's -x plus 3/2. So again, and if you want to show as a decimal, you can. 1.5 or a fraction 3/2. Okay, so that's where we're at. So now I'm going to plug values in. So say, okay, y is equal to negative input plus 1.5. So I plug 0 in, get 1.5. Again, you just evaluate here. Okay, now I'm going to plug in -3. So notice we have two negatives here. Negative on the outside, inside, so it's +3. Get 4.5. Okay. The next one here, I'm going to plug in 1. What's -1 plus 1.5? Just 0.5. And we're going to finally plug in 2. So this is -0.5. Okay. So again, when we're looking at these are all ordered pairs. Now, we can graph fractions. We can graph decimals. We just 0 and 1.5, so we'll go up 1.5 squares. -3, comma 4.5. 1, comma 0.5, and 2, comma -0.5. And notice once again, all these lines end up being a straight line. Okay, so all these points form a straight line. So I'm going to draw in a line that connects all those dots. I'm going to put arrows on it, which represents it goes forever. Okay. So the nice thing about this is you can always plug in inputs and get out outputs and then graph relationship on a graph. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is vertical and horizontal lines. So it says where in the graph is y is equal to 3. So that means the output will always equal 3. So I'm going to pick 3 random points. And these are going to be made up things. Okay, so 2, comma 3 would exist on this graph. 0, comma 3. -3, comma 3. Okay, so if I plot those points, there's 2, comma 3, 0, comma 3, and -3, comma 3. And if I say, okay, let's go ahead and connect those lines, those points, it forms a horizontal line. Okay, so horizontal lines are always y equals some sort of number. It is a horizontal line okay? And it's always x equals that value, or y equals that value. And notice we could see it right here. Those are all the same, okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Where is x equal -2? Those are inputs. So I'm going to plug in -2, and notice we could be -2 comma 3, -2 comma 0, -2 comma 4. And if I graph these, and I just graph all 3 points, -2 comma 3, -2 comma 0, and -2 comma 4, they form a vertical line. Now, what we talked before, some of you are saying, well, we can't have multiple answers for this. You can, it's just not a function. A vertical line, this is not a function. So I'm going to put not a function, because we have multiple answers for -2. But it is a vertical line, and it's always defined by x equals some sort of number. So that's a good thing to look at there. Okay? All right, so those are the notes on just the introduction to graphing for this chapter.